All right. I think we are live now on YouTube.
We
So,
are live. That's a
welcome to
bit sexy
everybody.
anyway.
Yep.
Well, there's
Welcome to
nobody here
everybody.
yet, but well, maybe there will be.
You never know. You
And
never know.
yeah, so
Uh,
I,
should
I, I
we,
guess we should.
yeah, just
I
kick
think we should
off the.
introduce ourselves.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I
Yeah.
know we did that before, but since we don't know, and
Yep.
even though it says who we are, um, I mean, this is Doug Smith
I'm
of
Doug
Doug's
Smith.
Dharma,
You can see it
and
on the screen.
yeah, right, and
Where is it?
I'm John Aaron. I'm not of Doug's Dharma, but I like Doug's Dharma, and it's not really Doug's Dharma anyway. But
No. That just means
yeah,
it's my interpretation. It's not my
exactly,
Dharma.
yeah.
Absolutely. No.
And
Yes.
I teach at New York Insight and founder of co-founder of Space to Meditate, and do a few other things in the meditation realm and in the Buddhist realm. So good to see those of you that are, well, we can't see those of you that are here, but
No.
hopefully people will be signing in. And
We'll be doing a
our
recording.
topic today
You want to start the recording
oh yeah,
or
let's start the recording. I forgot.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of this will be previous to the recording.
Right. Okay. So
Do you want to start or should I start?
you start.
Well, good morning, John. As always, great to see you. Another one of these wonderful Digging the Dharma podcasts. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, Doug. Nice to see you as well. And this is our second live YouTube podcast.
As well, yep.
And it was fun last time, so I hope it'll be fun this time, and maybe we'll have some people joining us live. And for those of you that haven't been with us before, we actually have about 70 other podcasts, but they're all audio from the last few years.
And this will be audio too, so yeah.
Yeah. But it's fun to be visible, I think. Got my hair cut,
Good, yeah.
Yeah, it's there. And yeah, I thought it would be interesting today to come back to a topic we've touched on various ways. I mean, we only had one prior podcast that I saw specifically about the quality of equanimity, which finds its way into any number of teachings from the early teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And starting with starting with the Anapanasati Sutta. It's the very end of that teaching, the end of the steps anyway. It's the last step. And then it's the fourth of the Brahma Viharas, the fourth of the Divine Abodes.
Jhanas too.
And then later, and seventh of the Factors of Awakening. And then later it comes into the teachings on the perfections of the heart, the Parami. And so it plays a pretty important role.
It tends to come at the last stage of so many different of these lists.
Yeah.
You have these lists of progress. We might think of them as lists of progress of one kind or another. And it tends to come at that very end stage, which doesn't mean it's the same as nirvana or enlightenment, but it means it's really important. So,
yeah, I mean, some people do equate it
could be
on that level,
yeah.
but but what is it? It's sort of actually the Pali word Upekkha. I know Bhikkhu Analayo translates it as equipoise, which implies a level of balance, I guess. And of course, words get in the way all the time. And it being one of the Brahma Viharas, being one of the Divine Abodes, I like to think of it as where loving kindness meets life, and meets our life experience, whatever that may be. But then, in a way, that's what mindfulness is. If we're really being present with our moment-to-moment experience from a place of non-judgment, from a place of, or non-judgmental awareness, not editorializing around the experience, that also is a kind of quality of equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me, allergy season. Uh, it seems like allergy season is most of the year, but I have to be equanimous around that.
That's
The
right. Yeah.
um, and it's I was thinking about it. I was giving, as I mentioned to you before, I gave a talk last night at New York Insight about this, and I was sort of putting it in the context of the 3 levels of dukkha.
Mm.
Um, there's dukkha, that is the quality of our own individual bodily suffering, primarily, and emotional suffering. Then there's the dukkha around impermanence, and then there's the dukkha around existential situations.
Mm.
And we could see the quality of equanimity meeting those 3 levels, or coming into play as we live our lives. How do we hold things when we're not feeling well? How are we when we're in pain? Um, how do we deal with the impermanent nature of everything?
Yeah.
Um, do we hold that from a place of balance? And then, of course, on a much more existential level, how are we with injustice and um, the presidential debate or the candidate?
Mm-hmm.
All of that. How do we work with any of this? And that, to
Yeah.
me, is sort of really bringing this quality into our lives, and knowing when it's not there. And
Yeah, because you don't want to. It's one of the. We were joking about having having one of these, getting a cold or something like that, and you don't really
yeah,
like what happens to you when you get a cold, when you feel sick, when you don't feel well. We don't like potentially the political situation right now, and I think it's too easy. It's very easy for us to fall into an idea that we should be equanimous, therefore we are,
right.
which would not be healthy. So, and it's difficult, I think, to be equanimous in many of these situations.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting about a video that I did quite a while back, actually, where I looked at a couple of passages from the early texts where the Buddha does seem to talk about, depending on how we look at it, situations where he seemed to say people were being too equanimous, in a sort of a quote unquote, too equanimous. There's
hmm
one where, and this is something that also Analia talks about in an article, I think, about equanimity. Um, One where a monastic is continually interrupting Sariputta when Sariputta is giving a Dharma talk, and all the monastics, including the Buddha, but all the other monastics are silent. And after the talk, I think uh, Sariputta stops talking eventually. And after this, the Buddha goes up to Ananda, who'd been in the audience, and sort of says, "Why didn't you say something when this senior monastic was being harassed, basically?"
Mm.
And the way the Buddha put that to Ananda, he used the word equanimity. Why were you being so equanimous when something a little stronger was perhaps required? And there's another similar sutta where the Buddha is talking with, I think it's some kind of renunciant, and asks this renunciate about various forms of being in the world. What should we basically not criticize and not blame? Should we criticize and blame, and that kind of thing?
Right.
And the um the renunciant basically says that the best thing we should do is to not praise and not criticize, because equanimity is the goal.
hmm
And the Buddha rejects that and says, no, we should criticize when it's appropriate, and blame and praise when it's appropriate. uh and again, this is a way in which, of course, we can interpret this as saying equanimity may not be the goal, or we can interpret it as saying that we have to understand equanimity in a fuller sense,
Right.
as allowing space for our ability to be critical when the time is right. And it's hard. I mean, I think it's, to my mind, it's one of the most difficult practices. Not to say it's the most advanced, perhaps, but it's certainly, for a layperson, is something that's in front of my mind a lot, and it's tough. I wish I could be equanimous in situations where I'm not sure I can.
So just describing what it's good to know about those suttas. Ajahn Suchito, who's written a beautiful book on the Paramis, talks about stupid equanimity, which is sort of what the Buddha is talking about there. It's like, that borders on the near enemy, which is indifference.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Not that we don't care. We do care.
Yeah.
And it's important to care. The question is, are we bringing, how do we confront injustice? How do we confront delusion in others and in ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we confront our own discomfort, our own, at some point, when we're dying, how do we handle that? How are we with that? And it's not, in my mind, and I think this is where it comes in so late in some of these teachings, like the awakening factors and even the Anapanasati. It's like a quality that has evolved through our own practice and through our own, as we gain in wisdom, the quality of equanimity is not something we get or have to even practice. It's just, it's a natural arising from that place of wisdom. And I think at this stage, for most of us, we have to remind ourselves of that quality. And it's so easy, particularly, at least for me, when it comes to situations where I've done something stupid, or where I'm really, I didn't, I don't know, where, I did something stupid and got sick as a result, something like that, I can find myself just being in a complete state of blame, and almost embarrassment at times, or I can say, "Oh, I'm human. This is like, this was not the most skillful thing that I did. It was probably unskillful, and I can move forward. I can sort of look at it from a place of wisdom, realize what the mistake was or what the unskillful action was, and move on from there, as opposed to beating myself up." Now, the challenge, of course, I think, is when we're confronting another, or when we're in a situation where action is really required, because there is an injustice, or because there is someone who is really stuck in delusion. And the far enemy, I think, of equanimity is anger and greed.
Yeah.
And so if we're stuck in that, if we're so angry that our reaction to someone else's delusion, or someone else's naivety or ignorance, or however we want to look at it, another action, somebody else's action, if we're so stuck in our anger, then the response is going to come from that place of anger. And as a result, it's not going to be as impactful. And so the question is, and so, when I'm ever teaching about it, the usual question is, well, what do you do about, it's really, serious injustice? There was a beautiful publication that was sent out by the Sacred Mountain Sangha, which was created by Thanissaro and Kittisaro, two former monastics who happen to be also two of my teachers. And they this came out about a month and a half, 2 months ago, addressing the situation in the Middle East. And there was a quote, I can't remember who it's attributed to, clearly a Palestinian Dharma practitioner, and it said, don't teach me about equanimity while you are bombing our hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really, I mean, it's that kind of hit me like a sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, so on the other hand, what is the option?
Yeah.
So we can take our anger, we can feel that anger. Can we hold our own anger and about this situation from a place of equanimity and respond from there?
Right. I mean, I would also say,
Isn't that more effective?
yeah, I mean, I would also say that the teaching on equanimity is not about, I mean, it's the same as the teaching on compassion or loving kindness. Thinking of all the Brahma Viharas, it's not
Mhm.
really about the other person or the person who's doing
Or the
the
country. Yeah.
or the country or whatever it
Yeah.
is, the organization that's doing the injustice. It's about ourselves.
Right.
And so, I mean, we have to, I mean, if we look at it as an attempt to uh, justify injustice or let somebody off, then we're never going to, that's inappropriate, number
Of course.
one. And we're never going to actually get anywhere with the practice. But if we think of it as a practice for ourselves, in other words, we're not doing ourselves any benefit by getting lost in anger and hatred. And so the equanimity is for our own benefit. I mean, of course, I'm not the person who's being affected in this case, but I mean, you know, uh, by analogy, it's the benefit of the person who is being affected. Uh, that would be the way to look at it, I think. I mean, certainly that was the intention of the Buddha. I mean, again, we all think of or we may think of the sutta on the two-handled saw. If somebody's tearing you to pieces with a two-handled saw, you should still have a mind of kindness, and which is way beyond anything that I can imagine as a normal human. But that's the sort of superhuman
Right.
ideal that the Buddha had for us. It's to our own benefit not to get lost in anger and hatred.
Right. Because, I mean, but just going back to then, so yes, a- it's about, it's our own heart, and then how we respond as a result of that.
Yeah.
So, if we want to, if we are activists in whatever way we may be activists, if we are stuck in the anger, that's not helping the situation.
Right.
Not to say there's anything wrong with the anger at that moment, because it's the anger that makes us look more closely, makes us curious, and then realize, okay, there's the anger. I can be with this anger, and I recognize that an action is being made completely through delusion, and how do I work with that?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a quality that is um, that allows us to be present with almost any situation,
Mm-hmm.
or that allows us to be present in a way that doesn't throw us off.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
so
think.
if we see an injustice, then we can go toward that injustice, with a place from a place of strength, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and stability.
I mean, it seems to me that what you're saying, which I think sounds right, is that in a certain sense, we should learn to look upon our anger itself with equanimity. In other words, that
Hmm.
when the anger arises, instead of either grasping at it and getting lost in it or pushing it away because anger is a bad thing,
Right.
we just simply are aware of the arising of anger with equanimity. And if we're able to do that, we could perhaps make more skillful use of the energy that
Right.
arises from the
Exactly.
anger without getting, because I mean, in certainly in early Buddhism, anger is never looked upon as a positive quality. But even so, I mean, I think we can acknowledge that and still sort of move forward with the fact that we're imperfect people, we're deluded people, we do get angry. And so how do we make the best use of, an imperfect situation. And I think that might be one way into it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a helpful quality, but it's a human quality.
Right.
And so, we take that humanity and recognize, oh yeah, there's a reason for this anger, and now what,
Yeah.
right? And the other, my teacher Matt Flickstein always used to say, um, we do everything possible to make the world a better place while accepting things as they are.
Yeah.
So from that place of acceptance, we move forward, and do whatever we can to make the place better. Now, I was also brought up last night and earlier this week, actually, with another group. One of the other traits that can get in the way of equanimity, which is perfectionism. And I wasn't joking. I was referring, what I brought up as an illustration of that is, excuse me, the wonderful Hulu series, The Bear, which if people aren't aware of The Bear, it's a really beautiful series. It's now in its third season. It's about a chef in Chicago, or about a restaurant in Chicago, which it was recommended to me to watch because I'll be moving to Chicago for a while. But anyway, the chef he's studied with all the best chefs. He's worked in all the great restaurants, and he's has his own restaurant now, and it's a very intense personality profile of everybody has in the show is profiled in one way or another, and their personalities come out. But he's like, you watch him kind of, I think, placing a kind of a little bit of saffron on a piece of scallop, on one piece of scallop, and it has to be just right before it goes out the door into the dining room. And he gets so angry when they want to take it, even though he's still working on it, as if, right, anybody's going to know, and or it's going to affect the flavor, and I get it, it's like this art for him, and yet it's really obstructing like everything else, and he's just so stuck on it, and it was like, yeah, wow. Is that really essential? It's not like, it's very interesting, right? Because you're dealing with, when you're dealing with food, you're really talking about impermanence. And the great chefs in these elegant restaurants, everything it's like how it's plated, right? And you get judged on, like, if you watch these cooking shows, you're judged on how the thing is plated. And it's like, okay, and then we're just going to eat it. And
but
that's going to be gone.
Yeah, it's like the Tibetan the sand mandalas.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
There's a certain perfectionism in making one of those. They're beautiful.
Course, yeah.
And then they're all swept away. It's sort of a similar kind of thing.
That's true.
Kind of
exactly. Actually, it's and so how are we when it's swept away, or how yeah. Was I thinking of also the wonderful artist who does a lot of environmental art, which is all temporary.
At least I'm thinking of one I think he's from England or Scotland.
Or Scotland. That's the one.
Yeah.
There's a couple of works over at the sculpture
Storm King
Park. Yeah.
Storm King.
Maybe somebody will pop in his name.
I don't remember his name.
Yeah. It'll come to me by the end after we sign off.
I'm terrible with names.
But like everything is placed, and then the wind destroys it, right? So it's greetings. Greetings from Xiao Mao.
Xiao Mao from Germany. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, he's one of my Patreon patrons. Sweet guy.
Yeah. So this is like, the things that we can observe in our own way of being, where suddenly our equanimity, such as it was, flies out the window.
Yeah.
And then how do we feel about that? when are the moments when we are most equanimous?
Yeah.
And what happened in those moments that brought that up? Um,
Well, I would say that the other issue with the perfectionism though is as you were saying before, there is a near enemy of equanimity, which is very, I shouldn't say very, but it's much easier to get into this kind of state of mind of being disconnected with the world, disjointed,
right, right,
not caring. And I think with our many of us have a sort of an innate sense of perfectionism, and spiritual bypassing, as many of us will know, may lead us when trying to get to equanimity and thinking we must be equanimous just to stop caring. I mean, that to me is very, very easy. It's very tempting, because then we can call ourselves, a good Buddhist practitioner who
right.
is above all of the worldly winds. By just sort of checking out, and meditation, especially long periods of meditation, can really be good at that if you don't do them properly. I mean, I've certainly gotten into that sometimes where you sort of bliss out and just, and sometimes you need it. Sometimes you do need a bit of a vacation, as long as you understand that it's a vacation and not, the point.
Yeah, yeah. Some people call that stupid samadhi. It's just like you're just kind of spaced out, and you think
And
you're like
there's
in samadhi.
as
Yeah,
long as you
and
understand what it is,
right,
yeah,
right.
it's okay. But yeah,
Um, uh, yeah. Thanks for actually bringing the formal practice into this, because that's also the real opportunity where we can uh, be with what is not pleasant
yeah,
from a place of equanimity, and we can kind of feel the difference, right? Uh, I was working with someone recently who really is dealing with serious chronic pain
mm,
and has been for a long, long time. And somebody suggested that she reach out to me, which appreciated. And I said, "So, have for the last 20 years, have you just been fighting this pain?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Ah, okay. So, have you tried like actually caring for this pain? Actually holding this pain without fighting it?" And it took her, so what was interesting was that I gave her, a suggestion as to how that could be maybe practiced. And then the response was, "Well, my pain is still here." Like, it was like literally a few minutes after I gave the I'm still feeling the pain. I said, "Yeah, of course. The pain isn't going to go away, right? What we're doing is changing our relationship to the pain and being able to be with it as opposed to pushing it away." So it's really a practice of acceptance, which doesn't imply that we don't want it to change. And so if we're dealing with physical pain and obviously we can do something about it, we do. And so in formal practice, and for many of us and hopefully many of the people that are listening, if you've your first more extended period of meditation, whether that was a full day of practice or 8 day, 10-day retreat or whatever, you're sitting there really suffering. Your knees are in pain, your shoulders are in pain, it's like you're doing everything possible to get it better and it's just not changing. And you're fighting it and you're upset with the fact that you can't get out of this pain. And it's like, it's torture.
yeah, it can be.
But most of the torture is coming from the place of non acceptance,
Yeah,
as opposed to like, okay, let me just be with this. Let me let go of the resistance, or have it, or actually soften around the resistance, right? And then what shifts? And then there's that moment of, oh wow, you know, yeah, if I just come from this place of acceptance, which is one form of equanimity, it's like, suddenly that suffering around the discomfort has abated.
yeah,
And so as we practice formally, we have these opportunities all the time to kind of notice when equanimity is present and when it's not. Um, And it's like a significant shift that happens, I think, over a period of days, weeks, and years.
And you get
where
little
we
glimpses
start
of
to
it from
see that.
time. Yeah, you get
Of
glimpses of it
course,
from time to
yeah,
time. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So equanimity, it's a really important part of the teachings. As we said at the very beginning, it finds its way into any number of major teachings.
yeah,
Um, and as we practice, we start to see it more and more. And I'll tell you one thing that I have a hard time being equanimous about. It's like when my coffee cup is empty and I can't like quickly fill it.
yep, yep. I've just finished mine, so yeah,
Okay.
I hear you. I see where you're coming from.
And so as we're coming to the end of this uh, podcast, this streaming podcast, and there are a few of you online live, and hopefully there'll be more tuning in later. And we will be back next Friday, I think we decided.
Yeah.
Eventually, we will have a regular period for this, so we can announce it well in advance. But the plan now is for next Friday. But in the meantime, if you'd like to support us, you can actually buy us a coffee. That helps support the cost of the podcast and allows us to keep going.
At diggingthedharma.com. Let's see.
Yeah, can we put that on the? Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah,
Okay, you got it together.
Yeah.
So, friends and Doug, enjoy the rest of your. Well, if you're in this country, this is actually July 4th that we're doing this. So enjoy your July 4th celebration. Some of us have a hard time with that sometimes when we get
Sometimes
to the
it's
state of.
more difficult
And
than others.
if you happen to be in England, I hope you voted, and good luck with that. And it's the political winds are doing strange things, so we shall see.
Yeah.
But we can hold it all with equanimity.
We will do our best.
All righty. Okay,
Great to
friends,
talk to you,
take
John.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be well.